2 years after my divorce, my ex-wife showed up at my door 4 months pregnant and asked me to help her. Not because the baby was mine. She knew it wasn't. She came back because the man she left me for bailed, and somehow she thought I might still be stupid enough to save her. Before all that, Megan and I had been married for 8 years. We met in our mid-20s, dated for 2 years, got married, bought a nice house, built what looked from the outside like a solid life. For a while, it actually was. I worked as a field auditor for a national accounting firm, which meant I was gone a lot. Sometimes 2 weeks out of the month, sometimes more. Different cities, different client sites. Long days in conference rooms, hotel check-ins, airport food, early flights, the whole routine. Megan worked a steady marketing job for a software company. Normal hours, home every night, weekends off, stable schedule. On paper, it made sense. In real life, it created a crack between us that kept getting wider. She hated my travel, not disliked it, hated it. I heard about it constantly. I wasn't home enough. She felt like she was married to a suitcase. She said she ate dinner alone too many nights. She said no amount of money made up for living like that. And to be fair, I understood why she was frustrated. I wasn't blind. But the money was good, and that job gave us a lifestyle we both enjoyed. Nice house, nice cars, vacations we couldn't have afforded otherwise. I thought we were making a trade. I thought we were both benefiting from it. About 3 years into the marriage, I decided to fix it. I talked to my company, shifted my workload, cut my travel way down. Instead of being gone most of the month, I was only traveling maybe 1 week, sometimes less. I really thought that would change everything. I thought I was giving her exactly what she'd been asking for. Instead, it was like my being home ruined something for her. At first, I told myself she just needed time to adjust. I'd been gone so much for so long. Maybe the routine felt different. But after a few weeks, I couldn't keep explaining it away. She'd come home from work, barely say anything, and disappear into the bedroom. Dinner together stopped. Sitting on the couch together stopped. Even stupid little things, like talking about our day or watching a show, disappeared. And the intimacy dropped off hard. We went from being a normal married couple to barely touching each other. Months would go by, and it felt like she was living around me instead of with me. Then I noticed the phone. That phone never left her hand. She carried it room to room like it was attached to her. Screen down on the table, face turned away if I got too close. If it buzzed, she grabbed it fast. One night, it lit up on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs. I wasn't even reaching for it. I just glanced over when it vibrated. She came down the stairs so fast it honestly startled me, snatched it up, looked at me, and tried to act normal, but she was breathing hard like I'd caught her doing something. That was the moment something in my gut locked into place. After that, I started paying attention. Her errands got longer. Her girls' nights got more frequent. She'd say she was running out for one thing and be gone 4 hours. She suddenly needed a lot of solo time for someone who used to complain that I was never home. I didn't confront her right away because I didn't have anything real yet. I just watched. I listened. I started noticing patterns. Then I got my first real crack in the story. One evening, Megan told me she was meeting her friend Rachel for dinner. Said they'd been trying to get together for a while and finally made it happen. Fine. I said okay and left it alone. The next day, purely by chance, I ran into Rachel. We made small talk for a minute, and I said something easy like, "Hope you and Megan had fun last night." Rachel looked confused. Not awkward, not guilty, just confused. She said, "I haven't seen Megan in weeks. We keep trying to plan something, but it hasn't happened." That was it. No dramatic music, no giant explosion, just one normal sentence that told me my wife had looked me in the face and lied. I didn't go home and confront her. I didn't start yelling. I didn't even mention it. I just kept my face straight, drove home, and made a decision. I was done guessing. I was done sitting in my own house wondering where my wife really was every time she said she was out with a friend or picking something up from the store. If I was about to blow up my marriage, I wanted proof so solid she couldn't talk her way around it. So I hired a private investigator. And 5 days later, I was sitting on a park bench with a folder in my hands that was about to end my marriage for good. I still remember the way Dana handed me that folder. No build-up, no dramatic speech. We met at a park in the middle of the afternoon, sat down at one of those weathered picnic tables, and she slid it across to me like it was a tax file. I opened it, and within 10 seconds, 8 years of marriage was over. There were photos, a lot of them. Megan getting into the same man's car. Megan leaning into him in a parking lot. Megan laughing with him outside his house like she didn't have a husband at home. Megan kissing him. Megan walking into his place after work and not leaving for hours. Every photo had a timestamp. Every day had a pattern. She'd leave her office around 5, drive straight to his neighborhood, stay there 2 or 3 hours, then come home and act like she'd been out doing normal life stuff. Groceries, errands, meeting friends. All the little lies that sound harmless when you hear them one at a time. Dana kept talking while I looked through the pages. She'd followed Megan for 5 straight days. Same guy every time, same routine. She had his name too, Brandon Hale, 34, worked in real estate, divorced, no kids. Lived about 15 minutes from our house. She even had notes about when they left together, when they came back, and what days Megan stayed longer. It wasn't a maybe. It wasn't emotional cheating or vague suspicion or me reading too much into something. It was a full relationship, and from the way it looked, it had been going on long enough that neither of them was even being careful anymore. I felt sick, but not in a dramatic way, more like my body just shut down. My hands went cold, my chest felt tight. I kept flipping through the folder, even though I already had enough after the first few pages. Part of me was still hoping I'd find some explanation buried in there. Something stupid, something innocent. But there wasn't one. Just photo after photo of my wife giving another man the version of herself I thought was still mine. I took the folder home and sat with it for a few hours before I did anything. I didn't call Megan. I didn't text. I didn't go looking for Brandon. I called a divorce lawyer the next morning and scheduled a meeting. By noon, I had papers started. I wasn't going to do the whole marriage counseling, let's talk this out routine. I wasn't interested in hearing how lonely she was, or how I worked too much, or how it just happened. People love to act like betrayal fell out of the sky. It didn't. It took planning. It took lies. It took daily choices, and I was done. That evening I got home before she did, and sat in the living room with the folder in my lap. No TV, no music, just the room light on and me waiting. When she walked in, she saw me right away. Then she saw the folder. I watched her face change before I said a word. That was the first honest thing she'd shown me in months. She asked, "What is that?" I stood up, walked over, and handed it to her. She opened it, looked at the first page, then the second. I could actually see the blood drain out of her face. She flipped faster after that, like maybe if she moved quickly enough, the evidence would somehow look less real. When she looked back up at me, she started with the weakest lie possible. "It's not what it looks like." I just stared at her. Then she tried, "You went through my things?" I said, "No, I hired somebody better." That shut her up. For maybe 10 seconds, the room was completely silent, except for the papers shaking in her hands. Then she started crying, but even that didn't move me. Maybe if I hadn't seen the photos, maybe if I didn't know how long she'd been lying to my face. But once the truth is sitting in your hands with timestamps on it, tears hit different. She said she was going to explain. I told her not to bother. She said we could work through it. I told her we weren't working through anything. I told her I'd already spoken to a lawyer. I told her I was filing for divorce. Then I said the only thing left to say: "You need to leave." She looked at me like she didn't believe I meant it. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she thought there would be a long emotional fight first. There wasn't. I'd already had the hardest conversation by myself on that park bench. By the time she got home, I was done. She moved out that week. And once the separation started, whatever was left of our marriage went cold fast. Once Megan moved out, everything got very quiet. Not peaceful right away, just quiet in that strange way a house gets when somebody's gone, but their absence is still sitting in every room. A coffee mug she forgot in the cabinet, a sweater still hanging in the hall closet, half a bottle of shampoo in the shower. All those little leftovers that make it obvious a life just split in two. But emotionally, I was past the part where any of that softened me. The folder had done its job. Whatever confusion I might have had was gone. The marriage wasn't ending because we drifted apart. It was ending because she lied to me, daily, while carrying on a full relationship behind my back. The divorce itself took about 6 months to finish. In our state, we had to stay separated before it could be finalized, so there was a waiting period built into the process. That was probably the only reason it dragged out, because there really wasn't much left to fight over. We didn't have kids, which made everything simpler. The house was in my name, so I kept it. She kept her car, took half the savings, and that was basically it. We spoke maybe 3 or 4 times the entire separation, and every conversation was stiff, short, and practical. Everything else went through lawyers. No emotional closure, no real apology, no attempt at rebuilding. Just paperwork, signatures, and 2 people walking away from something that had already died before the court caught up to it. When the divorce was finally done, I expected to feel some huge emotional release. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Not heartbroken anymore, not raging, just drained. Like I'd been carrying a heavy bag for months and finally got to set it down. So I did what a lot of people do when they're trying not to fall apart. I got busy. I started going to the gym more consistently. I picked old hobbies back up, reconnected with friends I'd let slide during the marriage. Said yes to things instead of sitting at home replaying old arguments in my head. It wasn't some dramatic transformation. I didn't wake up one day healed. It was slower than that. Just one decent week, then another, then enough decent weeks in a row that life stopped feeling like recovery and started feeling normal again. Over time, I also heard pieces of what happened after Megan left. Not from her, from mutual friends. People who knew both of us but were smart enough not to play messenger. Brandon and Megan made their relationship official pretty quickly after the divorce. That alone told me a lot. It meant I wasn't dealing with some impulsive mistake or one bad decision. She already had her next life lined up. They moved in together, did the public relationship thing, posted pictures, acted like they were starting some big new chapter. Good for them. I didn't care. At least, that's what I told myself, and mostly it was true. Then about 10 months before she showed up at my house, I heard they'd broken up. Apparently Brandon had cheated on her with multiple women. Same man she blew up an 8-year marriage for, and he turned around and did the exact same thing to her. I'm not proud of it, but when I heard that, I did feel a small, cold kind of satisfaction. Not joy, just a very clear sense that the universe had balanced one line item. By then, I was already moving forward anyway. About a year after the divorce, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just getting used to being around someone new without all the old tension hanging over everything. Then I met Claire. She was calm, grounded, easy to talk to, and maybe the biggest difference was that being around her didn't feel like work. I didn't have to manage the room. I didn't have to guess what version of the night I was walking into. She knew I'd been through a rough divorce. She knew the cheating was part of it. I didn't dump all the details on her right away, but I was honest, and she handled it like an adult. No drama, no weird jealousy, no trying to compete with a ghost. We'd been together about 4 months when things started to feel genuinely steady. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder at my past. Then one random evening, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anybody. Claire wasn't coming over until later, and I hadn't ordered anything. I opened the door, and there she was.
Megan.
I hadn't seen her in person since the divorce was finalized. At first, my brain barely registered anything except that it was actually her. Then I noticed she was pregnant. Not barely, not maybe, clearly pregnant. 4 months, maybe more. She stood there with one hand on her purse strap, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen from her before. We just stared at each other for a few seconds, and I finally said, "What are you doing here?" She swallowed, looked past me into the house and said, "Can I come in? We need to talk about the timing." I didn't want her in my house. That was my first thought. Not anger, not confusion, just a hard, immediate resistance to the fact that she was standing on my porch again, like she had any right to be there. But something in her face told me this wasn't a casual drop-in, so against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the living room slowly, like she was entering a place she used to know but didn't belong in anymore, which, to be fair, was exactly what it was. I stayed standing for a second, then sat down across from her. She wouldn't look at me. She kept rubbing her hands together and shifting in her seat. The silence dragged long enough that I finally said, "You've got about 1 minute before I ask you to leave, so say what you came to say." She took a breath and said, "I need to talk to you about the timing of this pregnancy." That sentence was so strange, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I asked her what that was supposed to mean. She said she was about 16 weeks along, roughly 4 months, and that based on the dates, conception would have happened in late June or early July. Then she looked at me like I was supposed to fill in the rest myself. So I did the math. Our divorce had been finalized in April 2 years earlier. Before that, we'd already been separated 6 months. And even before the separation, we hadn't been intimate in at least a couple months. There wasn't even a gray area here. There wasn't even room for confusion. I looked at her and said, "You and I haven't slept together in almost 3 years. We were over long before the divorce paperwork was signed. So why are you here?" She got defensive right away, which told me she already knew how bad this looked. She said I needed to hear the full story before I judged her. I told her I was already judging her, but she could go ahead anyway. That's when the whole thing came out. After the divorce, she stayed with Brandon. They were together for about 1.5 years. Then, around 10 months earlier, she found out he'd been cheating on her with multiple women. She kicked him out, broke things off, told herself she was done with him. But about a month later, she got lonely, reached back out, and made what she kept calling a mistake. One night, one time. Then she left the next morning and blocked him. A few weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She told him, and according to her, he wanted nothing to do with it. Said she was trying to trap him. Blocked her. Told her to handle it herself. Threatened lawyers if she came after him for support. The more she talked, the uglier it got. Not because I was shocked by his character, but because I could see exactly why she was sitting in my house. She wasn't there to confess. She wasn't there for closure. She was there because she was out of options. Then she finally said it. She knew the baby wasn't mine. She wasn't trying to pretend otherwise. She just needed help. Financially, emotionally, practically. She said she didn't know who else to turn to. Her family had pulled back after the divorce. Most of her friendships had faded. Brandon was gone. She was scared, pregnant, alone, and asking if I could at least be there for her as a friend. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so completely disconnected from reality that my brain didn't know what else to do. I said, "You came to your ex-husband, the man you cheated on, and asked him to help you raise the other guy's baby?" She started crying then, real crying, not controlled tears. Said she knew how bad it sounded. Said she had nobody. Said she was terrified of doing this alone. And I'll be honest, there was a small part of me that felt something human in that moment. Not love, not attachment, just basic human pity. She looked wrecked, tired, cornered, but pity is not the same thing as responsibility. So I told her as clearly as I could that I was sorry she was in that position, but this was not my problem to solve. The baby wasn't mine. The situation wasn't mine. Her choices had led her here, and I was not stepping back into her life to carry consequences that belonged to someone else. She wiped her face and looked at me for a long second. Then her tone changed. She said, "What if I claimed you were the father anyway?" And just like that, whatever sympathy I had left disappeared. The second she said that, the whole room changed. Up to that point, I'd been firm but calm. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't insulting her. I was just saying no. But the second she floated the idea of naming me as the father anyway, even as some kind of threat born out of panic, it stopped being a sad conversation and turned into something else. Something colder, something legal. I leaned forward and said, "Try it." She blinked at me like she hadn't expected me to answer that fast. I told her if she filed anything, I would demand a DNA test immediately. I said there wasn't a judge on earth who was going to look at our timeline and think that claim made sense. We'd been divorced for 2 years. We'd been separated long before that. We hadn't even been in contact. And once the test came back negative, which it absolutely would, I'd do everything I could to make sure her stunt blew back on her. I'd hire a lawyer. I'd document everything. I'd make it clear she knowingly tried to drag me into a paternity case for a child that wasn't mine. I didn't raise my voice once, but I meant every word. She could hear that. That knocked the desperation out of her fast. She looked down, started crying again, and said she didn't mean it like that. Said she was scared. Said she wasn't thinking straight. Said she just needed me to understand how bad things were. I told her I understood perfectly. She was out of money, out of support, and the man she picked over me had vanished the second real responsibility showed up. I said I understood all of that. But understanding someone's situation does not create an obligation to fix it. And that was the part she still didn't seem to get. Then she asked me one last question. She said, "So that's it? After 8 years, you feel nothing?" I remember looking at her and thinking how strange it was that she still framed everything like I was abandoning her. Like I was the one walking away from vows. Like history started on my couch that night, instead of years earlier when she lied to my face and built a second relationship while I was still her husband. So I told her the truth. I said, "Those 8 years ended when you decided I was something you could betray and still come home to. You don't get to cash that marriage in now because your life fell apart." That landed. She went completely quiet after that. No more bargaining, no more crying speech, no more trying to turn this into some shared tragedy. She just sat there for a few seconds, staring at the floor, then slowly stood up. She picked up her purse, walked to the door, and before she left, she turned back and said, "I am sorry for all of it." I didn't answer. I opened the door and let her out. After she left, I just stood there in the entryway for a while, replaying the whole thing. My ex-wife had come back into my house pregnant with the other man's child and tried, in one conversation, to get sympathy, support, and then leverage. It was surreal. The kind of thing that sounds made up when you say it out loud. I called Claire that same night and told her everything. Not a cleaned-up version. The whole thing. Megan showing up, the pregnancy, the request for help, the paternity threat. Claire listened, asked a few calm questions, and then said exactly what I needed to hear. That I handled it right, and that having sympathy for someone doesn't mean letting them back into your life. That mattered more than I can explain. It reminded me how different a healthy relationship feels from a manipulative one. For about a week after that, I didn't hear a word from Megan. No calls, no texts, no legal papers, nothing. A small part of me stayed ready for some kind of fallout, because once someone says something like that, even in panic, you don't completely relax. Then one evening I got a message from her. It was long, apologetic, and embarrassingly self-aware. She said she was ashamed of the way she approached me. Said showing up at my house was wrong. Said threatening to file a false paternity claim was even worse. She admitted she was desperate and not thinking clearly. Then she said she had finally reached out to her family, told them the truth, and they were willing to help her through the rest of the pregnancy. She said she was going to be okay. She wished me well. I read it once, deleted it, and moved on. I thought that was the last loose end. It wasn't. A couple months later, I found out just how far Megan had gone to clean up the mess she made. It came through the same mutual friend who'd filled me in before. We were grabbing coffee, talking about completely unrelated stuff, and then she said, almost casually, "So Megan finally got a lawyer and filed for paternity against Brandon." I just looked at her for a second and said, "Good." And honestly, I meant it. Apparently, Brandon tried exactly what men like him always try when consequences finally catch up. He denied it, claimed Megan was lying, claimed she was trying to pin the pregnancy on him because she was bitter and alone. Fought the whole thing. Tried to drag it out. Tried to act like the test might somehow come back in his favor. But once the court ordered the DNA test, that was the end of the fantasy. It came back positive. No surprise, no mystery, no loophole. He was the father. From what I heard, he was furious, not worried, not ashamed, furious. Like reality had wronged him somehow. He tried to argue, tried to challenge it, tried to push back on support. None of it mattered. Once the test was in, the court didn't care how angry he was. Biology is biology. Paperwork is paperwork. And for once, the right person got tied to the responsibility. About a month ago, Megan had the baby, a girl. That was the first moment in the whole story where I felt something close to peace about it. Not because of Megan, not because I suddenly cared what happened between her and Brandon, but because none of this was that little girl's fault, and she deserved better than being born into total chaos, with everyone pointing fingers and dodging responsibility. At the very least, her actual father is on the hook now. That matters. Kids shouldn't have to pay for the selfishness of adults before they can even talk. As for Megan, I honestly don't know what her life looks like day to day now, and I don't want to. I'm sure it's hard. I'm sure being a single mom wasn't the future she pictured when she blew up our marriage. I'm sure there are moments where she looks back and realizes just how many bad decisions had to stack up to get her where she is. But none of that changes the core truth for me. I did not create that situation. I was not responsible for fixing it. And the fact that I once loved her did not mean I owed her access to my peace after she destroyed the relationship that gave her that place in my life. That's really the part I hope people understand when they hear a story like this. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Saying no to someone who hurt you is not bitterness. Refusing to carry consequences that belong to other people is not selfish. There are a lot of people in this world who only rediscover your value when the person they picked over you lets them down. That does not mean you were meant to be their backup plan. It just means they finally ran out of places to land. Looking back now, I'm actually grateful for how that night went. Not because it was pleasant. It wasn't. It was one of the most surreal and uncomfortable conversations of my life. But it showed me something important. 2 years earlier, I might have gotten pulled into her chaos out of guilt, history, or that old instinct to fix things. This time, I didn't. I listened, I understood, and I still said no. That told me I really had moved on. Claire and I are still together, and we're talking seriously about moving in next year. Life feels steady, quiet in a good way. The chapter with Megan is closed, and this time I know it's actually closed. I wish her daughter well. I even wish Megan well from a distance. But distance is the key part of that sentence. If you made it this far, I appreciate you being here. If this story hit you in any way, please like the video, share it with someone who'd have strong thoughts on it, and subscribe if you want more real stories like this. And I'd really like to hear what you think. At what point do you think the marriage was already over in practice, even before the divorce? If you were in my position, would you have let her stay and talk at all? And once she threatened a false paternity claim, would you have handled that any differently?